Buongiorno Mondo, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. The recent PBS film Dante Inferno to Paradise has been enjoying tremendous success and is bringing scores of viewers closer to the poet and to his masterpiece. I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down with Professor Riccardo Bruscagli, who in this first part of our conversation brings the comedy to life in a magical and moving way while guiding us through a profound and inspiring reading of the comedy, the film, and Dante himself. Grazie mille e buon ascolto.
Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to have with me here today Riccardo Bruscagli. Buongiorno, Riccardo.
Buongiorno, Fosca.
Riccardo is an old family friend, and we've known each other for many, many years. And it's true, a long, long time. I'm not going to say how many years. But we recently had the pleasure of reconnecting. Because your lovely wife, Christine, invited me to the Florence premiere of a very big and exciting project that you have been working on for quite some time. So we're here today to talk about Dante.
Yeah.
And to speak more specifically about the PBS documentary directed by Ric Burns called Dante Inferno to Paradise.
Yeah.
So I want to hear all about it, and I want to know what your role in it was, and I want to know more about this documentary.
The documentary is the result of a series of happy coincidences and, circumstances.
Okay.
Because, as I always say, I am not a dentista. Dentisti are a human species, very peculiar, very special. I am a professor, a scholar of Italian literature who tries to understand Dante. And my approach to Dante has been peculiar also in my career because I started with a series of events at the Teatro della Pergola here in Florence where I had to introduce a lot of very illustrious Italian actors who would perform Dante, certain text by Dante. I was chosen by the Società Dantesca Italiana probably because I was not an obsessive specialist of Dante,
right?
But they hoped that I had a more, let's say, a broader view of the poet. But it was quite a challenge because all of a sudden I was on stage at the Teatro della Pergola with these actors. And with an audience which was a very mixed audience of, scholars, but also students, intelligent people, curious retirees. And so I had to find a key to propose Dante not in a totally academic way. So naturally I had to be rigorous,
Okay.
but affable at the same time.
Right.
And this is when my wife Christine enter Christine, and she says, "Okay, this is the way you should present in English Dante to the masses, to the American people. That is to an audience which is probably curious about Dante, but also intimidated by Dante."
I think so.
And so Christine convinced the Società Dantesca Italiana to open up a little bit and to allow me to deliver 3 lectures, Inferno, Purgatorio, Paradiso, in English. That was the first time that the venerable rooms of the Dantesca opened to the...
Wow. And not even a Dantist, right? Not a Dante scholar, but just an Italianist.
They love me.
How could they not, Riccardo?
And I love them. But it was new.
Yeah.
It was new.
Yeah.
And it was very successful. But then there was a series of other connections and circumstances. At this point, enter Jane Morrow, another friend whose daughter was at the time going to school together with the son of Ric Burns, the director.
Yes.
And so this chain of, friendship and friends was conducive to our contact with Ric Burns. And I must say, it was love at first sight.
Yay!
And Ric plus Ric, Ric and Ric, Ric Burns and Riccardo Bruscagli really have worked together pretty well for a long time, 7 years.
I was going to ask you, so how long did it
Yeah,
take?
7 years. Naturally, there was COVID in between, which didn't help.
Right.
But the project was more complex and complicated, frankly, than I had expected.
Why is that?
Because I started with a very naive idea of the project. My idea was, okay, just put me in front of a camera and I will regurgitate everything that I know about Dante. And then you add a little, reenactments and nice images and the movie's done.
Doesn't work like that.
No, no, it didn't
I bet
work.
Rick set you straight on that.
No.
Yeah.
At a certain point, I was told that a movie is like a symphony, a symphony which builds up in time, and that was also for me the exciting part of this experience because it was the first time that really I was part of the orchestra.
Yeah.
I was not just I'm not saying even the conductor, but the soloist. I was part of the orchestra. And it was very exciting to work with the actors, with makeup artists, and with wonderful fixers. Sara Moretti, who was so able to find the right restaurant, the right location, the right place for everything. And the project grew and developed in that time. It was crucial, for example, the decision about the actor who would perform Dante in the movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because with Ric, I mean, truly, Ric is now a dear friend, but we saw things also in different ways so many times. I thought that the natural choice was a very good English actor. That's all.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many. And Ric instead insisted on having an Italian actor who naturally should be able to perform in English too.
Yeah, which is not always easy.
Because he said, I want the vibes
Yeah.
of an Italian.
Yeah.
And that was my finding.
He's excellent, by the way.
Yeah, and Antonio Fazzini.
Fantastic.
I knew Antonio Fazzini because he was a scholar, an art historian at Villa Tatti.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, nothing less. And this is where we met. We met when he was kind of transitioning from being an art history scholar into being an actor.
How interesting.
And which was not, as you can imagine, an easy choice.
No.
It was at the Scuola Normale, nothing less, di Pisa. And naturally, Fazzini is so impressive because he's so iconic. He really looks like Dante. I mean, the first time
Really
you
does
see
look
him
like Dante. It's striking.
on screen is almost eerie. I mean,
It really is.
But he's also a very cultivated man, very cultured man, very intelligent type of actor, and also very, very flexible. So, I mean, he really was very open to the interpretation of Ric Burns's Dante, because the Dante of our movie is not exactly the scourge of the church and the empire.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you see the monuments of Dante, he's always starting with the statue in Piazza Santa Croce in Florence. He's always so upset.
He looks really upset. Well, rightfully so. I mean,
Rightfully
they kicked
so,
him out.
But
in the
instead,
movie,
in the movie, Dante is more like a wounded creature.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because that's, I think, one of the things that struck me most about the film is that we do see these different sides of Dante, and we see him as someone who's suffering. We see him as an artist. We see him as a character in the comedy. So was that Ric's vision? Was that your vision? Was it something you came to together? How to depict? Because I think it works beautifully because you have all these, first of all, it's visually incredibly pleasing, the actors are all excellent, and it comes together very nicely, linking Dante's biography with his his role as a poet and then his role within the comedy. Can you talk a little more about that?
Two things.
Okay.
I mean, the first thing is that the movie has been in the United States very well received, but I'm so immersed in the project that I'm not even able to judge it anymore.
Yeah.
But one thing I think we are most very proud of is that it is the first time that somebody attempted to put together the life of Dante and the works of Dante.
Exactly.
Because there have been a number of movies and series, TV series about the life of Dante. You're too young, but I remember in 1965, there was a TV series, La Vita di Dante, in black and white, the good old Italian TV.
Right.
And Dante was performed by Giorgio Albertazzi.
Oh, interesting.
Who was naturally too handsome for the role.
I was going to say.
But a great actor. And it was a very honest, a very, very instructive, very didactic kind of production. But it was the life of Dante. And also recently there had been another movie, quite a remarkable movie by Pupi Avati, Dante, kind of a strange movie because it was so concentrated on Dante as a common human being that not one of the titles of his works is mentioned in the movie, which was kind of a weird choice. But the movie is interesting.
Okay.
But it's always about the life of Dante.
Right.
Or you have had some attempts to film the Divine Comedy. And starting with that really adorable silent movie from 1911, a silent movie. We
remember it.
We used some of the because it's really
interesting.
fun.
It's useful
fun,
also because you see this progression of the ways in which Dante has been depicted, but also the difficulty of capturing him.
And naturally very emphatic because naturally it was a silent movie.
Yeah.
And even if you go to the Museo Zeffirelli here in Florence, you see that Zeffirelli kind of toyed with the idea of filming the Divine Comedy. He left a lot of beautiful sketches and drawings, which you can see in the museum, but the project was never put into being. So our challenge and our difficulty was to weave together the life of Dante and the works of Dante. And honestly, I think this is the first time that this was attempted, was done, and this is one thing, as I said, that we must be proud of. The other thing that you were touching, the, let's say, particular vision of Dante himself in the movie. I have to say that I respected the vision of Ric Burns, who is, after all, the director of the production of the documentary. So his Dante, our Dante at this point, is not exactly a victim or a loser, but is a man who always fights against so many types of difficulties, odds, and obstacles. Yeah. And I think this comes out pretty well. And naturally, he's not always victorious, a protagonist of his own story. Probably the movie also explains how so many times he put himself in difficult situations.
Exactly.
Politically, poetically, socially, challenging, always challenging. Challenging the literary world of his time, challenging the political life of Florence, challenging the position of the church, challenging himself with this poem, which at a certain point he says, and Teodolinda Barolini quotes it in the movie, he says at a certain point, il poema mi ha fatto macro. It was a very severe diet.
Yeah.
He made me, he exhausted me, he
Yeah.
consumed me.
Yeah.
So
Consumed
this
me,
aspect of this character, I think, comes out very well.
Okay. I find you said you just quoted Teolinda Barolini, but you also there's a quote of yours in the movie that I want to read, and I want you to comment on it because I find Dante and everything you just said so. And I hate to use this word, and I'm doing air quotes, Riccardo, but it is very relatable in our world today. And I want to cite something you said, and I want you to speak to the relevance of Dante today, because you talk about him and how he puts himself into all these incredibly challenging situations, right? And his journey. So I want to ask you, you say Dante at a certain point, this is a classic midlife crisis, right?
Yeah.
And you say Dante at a certain point wakes up, looks around, doesn't recognize the landscape, the physical landscape and the moral landscape around him. And this is a moment of fracture in his existence. And it is a moment of fracture, which implies naturally not only his private life, but the life around him, which makes no sense anymore. And I find this, Riccardo, very relatable to a lot of people right now, young and old. So how do you think Dante's journey can help us in our journey?
I think the lesson, if there is a lesson to be learned, is comes from what Virgil says at the beginning of the comedy. When Dante wakes up and doesn't recognize the landscape around him.
Right.
And this is something that can happen to everybody. I mean, I think it must happen to everybody
I think
in their lives.
it has to, right?
Yeah,
it's
it has
part
to.
of growth, but
Yeah,
also it's
exactly.
normal. It's an existential crisis, right?
Yeah. And so you try to resolve your crisis. And in the first canto of the Inferno, in the Divine Comedy, Dante thinks that he can exit the selva oscura,
Right.
which means that this dark moment, this moment of darkness in his life, by himself, by his own forces. And actually, he can leave the selva oscura at the beginning of the poem, but then the three beasts, appear, and he cannot go beyond, which means that the crisis comes from habits. Like St. Thomas knew, the sin is not a sporadic action here and there.
Yeah.
The sin is a condition.
Yeah.
In a way, you become dependent, addicted to your bad behaviors, and you cannot go beyond.
Yeah.
Virgil arrives as a savior, as a helper. But what I always found absolutely incredible is that Virgil, in a way, has all the powers. I mean, he is sent by Beatrice, which means by the Virgin Mary. He has all the divine, insurances for his intervention. But he does not, with a magic wand, make the three beasts disappear. Mm-hmm. He says, a te convien fare altro viaggio. There is another way to go beyond the moment of darkness, which is, and this is the lesson, go through Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, which means what? Not to find the solution of your problems, the solution of your crisis within yourself necessarily. You have to go out in the world, and to know the entirety of the possibilities of the human species in order to go back to yourself. So in a way, I mean, when you have a crisis today, probably you think that you go into a retreat and meditate and go down into your own soul. The solution of Dante and the suggestion of Dante, the lesson of Dante is different. For a moment, forget about yourself. Forget about yourself. And try to know the others. Try to know the world. Try to know what the rest of humanity has done, how the humanity has misbehaved, how you can surpass your limits and become a better version of yourself, how you can reach happiness. At the end, everything will fall into place, let's say, because your sin, and this is the other really deep lesson, your sin is never only yours. I mean, it's you think that this is just your fault. It's never just your fault. It's the world around you, which is so many times wrong, and is at least partially responsible for your own wrongs. So there is this immense openness at the beginning of the Divine Comedy, and that's why it is a comedy and it's not a commedia, like Dante says, and not a tragedia like Virgil's Aeneid, because tragedia doesn't mean tragedy in the sense of a theatrical genre. In the Middle Ages, tragedia is a poem like the Aeneid. I mean, there's this kind of, high look on things and sublime style.
Exactly.
And instead, the comedy is mixed.
Exactly.
It goes from obscene to sublime and wants to embrace all aspects of humanity and therefore all aspects of human language.
I have a lot of questions for you. So my first is, you've taught the comedy. Now it's been made into this wonderful film version for an English-speaking population. And I wanted to ask you exactly that, Every Italian studies Dante at school, right? At least Inferno, okay? At least. But in the United States, there aren't too many of us, unless we're, passionate about Italian studies and the humanities, etc. What do you think the comedy, in addition to everything you've just said, can it teach, for example, the average American or American student, somebody who doesn't have that kind of proximity to the work? Because Italians really do grow up, especially here in Florence, but not only here in Florence, especially here in Florence, but Dante is really the main character, right? He's the main point of reference. But for us Americans, he still seems so distant.
Yeah, which can be also some sort of a paradoxical advantage, because in Italy you grow up with Dante, but sometimes with a conventional also vision of Dante, first of all, because in general it's limited to Inferno, and sometimes the things which are too familiar, you don't see them anymore.
Exactly.
Teaching Dante to foreign students, I did it many times in various American programs.
Including Stanford. Thank you very much.
Sometimes it's a very good experience also for the teacher because of the freshness of your audience, and because of the disarming questions that come up in certain classes, at least. Because the better than I do, I mean, the first instinct of an American student is this relatable, as you said, to me, to my life. Sometimes this can be kind of I'm not saying irritating, but I mean, okay, this is a great piece of literature, okay, read it. but
it's
I
also
understand.
relatable.
Yeah, but
it's also relatable.
And I think the way it is relatable, the ways are really many. We already talked about the crisis, the moments of darkness that everybody sooner or later experiences in their lives. But also, for example, the idea, which is at the base of the invention of purgatory, which is really the most original part of the Divine Comedy, the idea that even when you decide to change and you are ready to start a process of changing,
Yeah.
you have to be very patient with yourself. You need time. You need time. And purgatory is the realm of time. You need time and patience in order to eliminate the toxins from your let's say, body, from your organism. And then at the summit of the mountain of purgatory, there is this last ritual, which I always found truly moving. All the souls, after purifying themselves, it must be immersed in the waters of the Lethe, of the river of oblivion. At a certain point, you have to forget, and to forget yourself, and to forget what you did. No, not the things in itself, but you have to really to get rid of your remorse, because if you continue to look back, this becomes some sort of a perverse type of narcissism.
Yeah.
Okay, forget about what happened, and don't look back. Don't look back. And actually, in Dante's words, you are ready at the point you are ready to go up, to look up to the stars. And this moment of passage, as I said, I always found moving, because so many times people torment themselves with what they've done.
Oh, yeah.
And they cannot surpass. No, the lesson of Dante is oblivion. Oblivion is fun, is right. You have all the right to become, as I said, a better version of yourself.
And in addition to that passage that you just cited as a really important one, and I love the way you spoke about it, because I do think it's an important thing, and looking at purgatory, the way our lives then can, we can learn so much from that, being in that space, right? That space where we say, no, I'm moving up, I'm moving forward. What's done is done, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Dante's saying. Is there another passage in the comedy, either in the Inferno, Purgatorio, or Paradiso, that you really love? Your favorite passage? This is a question that John wanted me to ask you, because she has her favorite.
There is one, which is not one of the best known passages, but I must confess that it was a passage which made an immense impression on me. In one of those evenings at the Teatro della Pergola,
See?
There was an evening dedicated to the theme body and soul in Dante's work, and the actor was Ivano Marescotti, who became a dear friend and unfortunately died.
I'm sorry.
1 year ago, and we did together the edition of the Divine Comedy for the schools, where he recorded the whole poem. This is another story which would be also interesting to talk.
That's wonderful. We can talk about that too.
He was an incredibly dedicated actor, really a great human being, and he read that passage, which became my favorite passage, in such a way that I will never forget. So we are in paradise.
Okay.
Not the most popular.
Exactly. Not many people make it to paradise.
No, not the most popular of the three canticles. But also because you have to put yourself in a different spot in order to understand the poetry of paradise. You cannot ask from paradise what you already had and enjoyed in Inferno and Purgatory.
Yeah.
So we are in paradise. We are in the Canto 14, in the heaven of the sun, where the wise people reside, appear to Dante. And Dante, or better to say Beatrice, asks something to these wise men, philosophers and thinkers, and which is or can appear like a very peculiar point of Catholic theology. She asks, what happens after the resurrection, the final resurrection of the bodies? Because here you appear just like lights, like globes of lights. We don't see your bodies, but when they will be visibili rifatti, as she said, when you will be visible again with your bodies, with your resurrected bodies, what's going to happen? I mean, the conflict between this supernatural light of your souls and the materiality of the bodies that you'll... one of the wise men, who was Solomon, of all people, answers and says, well, when this happens, it will be happier, because it will be una persona tutta quanta again, will be a whole individual again. And the body will be different, will be such a strong body that will be able to tolerate the immense light of the soul. At this point, the two crowns of wise spirit explode in one amen, amen of enthusiasm. Che ben mostrar desio de corpi morti. And this amen demonstrated how they missed their bodies. And then the passage comes. Forse non pur per lor, ma per le mamme, per i padri e per quei che fur cari, anziché fosser sempiterne fiamme. Cioè, the idea that this enthusiasm, the idea of having back their bodies, not just for their own bodies, but for the human desire to see the people you loved the way they were, ma per le mamme, per i padri e per quei che fur cari. And in such a, you know, we might have the idea that paradise is abstract, is this game of lights and sounds, but this passage is so absolutely human.
I was just going to say, it's so relevant.
Yeah, and this incredible rhyme between amme, amen, and mamme. On one side, you have this word which is a Hebrew word, I mean liturgical, I mean kind of exotic,
right.
And it rhymes with mamme, which is not even a word, it's the balbettio della carne. I don't know how to say, is the first sound that
a child that a body utters, right? It's beautiful. It's just sounds.
Amme,
It's beautiful.
amme, mamme.
Beautiful.
And I've always found that passage really disarmingly beautiful, and I will always remember the way my friend Marescotti read it.
Must have been incredible. This is a beautiful passage, and not many people get to it, I think.
Yeah. And Paradise is full of these passages. Naturally, you have to read Paradise forgetting about Inferno and about Purgatorio, because Dante forgets about himself as a poet, as the poet he has been in Inferno and Purgatorio.
Yeah, exactly.
It is such an amazing passage. I always say it is as if a painter was being an immensely gifted, figurative painter, Velázquez, I don't know, somebody like that, all of a sudden becomes Rothko. All of a sudden becomes an abstract expressionist.
Crazy.
Totally abstract. I mean, he renounces all the tools that he had been used so beautifully in the first two canticles. I mean, the first two canticles, the body of the damned ones, but also of the purging ones, are at the center of the representation sometimes. Dalla cintola in su tutto il vedrai, Farinata. I mean, sometimes Dante is able to give us a character with the movement of a muscle in his face.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so corporeal. And in the Paradise, all this doesn't exist anymore. Dante doesn't see the bodies, sees only, as I said, globes of light, varied in shape and density of light and movement, but really is a tour de force.
Yeah.
Is a tour de force.
Absolutely.
And so you cannot ask the type of emotions that you had in Inferno and Purgatorio from Paradise. And Dante, from the very beginning, kind of explains it very clearly. I mean, I have been in Paradise. I have been in the Empyrean, which is the real paradise, by the way. And I've seen things that coming down from there, ne sa ne può narrare chi di lassù discende. I mean, when you come back, you don't know and you can't retrieve that type of emotion. Yeah. So from the very beginning, he's saying that his poetry in Paradise will be defective, will be approximate, will be a poetry so many times of impotence, of frustration.
Yeah.
So much more subjective, in a way, and lyrical, compared to the objectivity and the narrative of the other two canticles, but equally charming and fascinating, especially because there is always this fight against his memory, because he cannot remember what he saw perfectly, and this fight against his language, because even the little, il poco that he can remember is too much for his human language. So what you read in Paradise is the shadow of a shadow.
Yeah.
And this is the special, even kind of perverse fascination of the last.
Yeah, the last canto.
Thank you to Professor Riccardo Bruscagli for being such a phenomenal guest, and to all of you for listening. I can't wait for part 2 next week. So be sure to tune in and hit that subscribe button so you catch every episode. And remember, show some love with your comments. Grazie mille e alla prossima volta.